spilling all the tea was still too hot. Lakeysha Keysha, queen of the plot. Hit that bell, cause the tea don't stop.
Guys, let's go ahead and jump into this video. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys are subscribed. And also, if you guys are not following me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Snapchat, go ahead and follow me at Lakeysha Keysha. Now, also go over there on Twitch and follow me. I am creating a whole different community over there. Go ahead and follow me. I'm trying to get to 1,000. I think I'm at 50. Go ahead and follow. Now, let's jump into this messy mess. Now, I know some of y'all thought that it was all over, but it is not all over. In fact, Simon is pretty much objecting the final order to declare this divorce and allow the prenuptial agreement to be enforced. In fact, the order that was created maybe a week ago, let's get into it. What this order says is that Simon is objecting to the final order and he has no merit to do so. So what Porsha's attorney is doing, Porsha's attorney is pleading with the court and asks the court to not only reinforce the prenuptial agreement, but allow Porsha's attorney fees in the sum of over $200,000 to require and force Simon to pay her the $40,000 a month for the 14 months. And additionally, one of the stipulations that was in there, guys, and I kind of spoke on this, was that Simon got a life insurance policy and made Porsha the beneficiary of the amount that he is required to pay. And pretty much what that means, I guess, if he doesn't pay it, if he should pass away, she can get the money. But I was thinking about that. Even if he did add her, he can always get her taken off. So I don't understand that. But Porsha is trying to get some stability here, y'all. She wants the money and she wants it by any means necessary. So this is actually crazy to me because I'm like, girl, you want that money. So it just goes to show that Simon has to have some money, because I know y'all keep calling him a broke Nigerian, but he can't be this broke if she's going this hard, right? So not only does she want those things, she is requesting the title to the 2021 Rolls-Royce Ghost. And let me just share my screen. I'm not going to read this entire thing to y'all, but just so y'all know, I ain't making shit up, because I know, they dragging people online, talking about they making stuff up, child. But as you can see, I've outlined some of it. But Porsha is requiring the title to the 2021 Rolls-Royce Ghost automobile that is, at the time of this agreement, titled in Simon's name only, in connection with the transfer of the 2021 Rolls-Royce Ghost automobile. Wife, husband shall pay off any and all debt owed on this car. So Porsha, like, pay it off, give me the title, it belongs to me. Now, if we were to get into where did all of this come from, as you guys as you guys remember, I went to court and I recorded everything. But what Simon was actually disputing is not necessarily that he did not want to pay Porsha. He disputed the terms in which he's required to pay, because he said, listen, okay, I'm going to sign this prenuptial agreement. I'm going to pay you because you're my wife. I don't want you to work, which essentially means if we should break up, it will probably take you 3 years or so to get yourself on your feet to start working. Well, Simon is saying Porsha broke that agreement. So essentially he's saying, why should I have to pay this woman when we agreed that she would not work? But here's the deal also, y'all. I don't believe in the prenuptial agreement. It may have said that. Now, I could be wrong. Now, because if you guys remember, the judge ruled to enforce the prenuptial agreement. But of course, Simon is objecting still, which means he is preserving his right to an appeal. Now, for those of you that may have forgot, Let's get into some of the judge's last words.
Include this in the feedback or ruling. At the onset, I mentioned that there's the pending motion to vacate, Judge. So I don't want to say that there are no other issues. I think that's contained within this. And the request I had made earlier is that the court looks at that pending motion to vacate the order if the court is going to enforce the prenuptial agreement. So that is pending. I did raise that at the beginning in my opening.
Now, let me kind of touch on that for a moment. The judge enforcing the prenuptial agreement, part of the prenuptial agreement simply said that Porsha could not film in the house without Simon's permission. Like, this is what it says. So what Simon's attorney is saying, if you are going to enforce the prenup, we know that the court can't rewrite the contract, but if you're going to enforce the prenup, you kind of got to enforce the entire thing. You can't pick and choose. So in this case, the judge said, I'm enforcing a prenup, but I'm going to still let her film, which is a problem because you're either going to enforce it or not, because it seemed like the judge is doing preferential treatment, because if you're enforcing a prenup, you're enforcing a prenup. You can't say, I'm enforcing it, but you can still do this. So let's get into the judge's final words.
Obviously, we oppose that then.
Okay. Okay, I'll start with the conclusion first, and then I'll give you my findings of fact and some conclusions of law. I am going to enforce the prenuptial agreement. I'm going to grant the motion to enforce. So, Mr. Kessler, I'm going to have you write this proposed order, and the reason why I say write the proposed order, I've reviewed your proposed order, but there are some changes that I plan to make regarding it. And so first, I'd like to state that...
So let me just stop there. So this is where the issue now is coming, because as you guys heard the judge, he has tasked Porsha's attorney with creating the order. Now, there are some discrepancies because it doesn't seem like Simon is liking some of the verbiage that he is putting in the order. Now, in court, Simon's attorney did say that if Kessler was going to draft this order, that they wanted to make sure that it doesn't get to a salacious tone. And what that means is, as you guys have heard Simon say over and over again, he is going to appeal until he can't appeal anymore. The court order matters because that is pretty much what the appellate court is going to look at. So if there is salacious, and it doesn't, I wouldn't even say that it's salacious. If there is information in there that's saying specific things happen in court, it may make it harder for him to actually get an appeal.
As what's been said, we've been through quite a bit of testimony, especially if you're including under PACE and the testimony that was given during the discovery hearing and now the hearing today. We have really dug into this deeply. It's the issue regarding discovery was a novel issue. And an interesting one, and I'll say that both of the attorneys were very good and competent attorneys, and I will say that Ms. Ferry presented some very novel ideas and did her best as far as presenting creative arguments. But in the end, this was a very carefully negotiated prenuptial agreement, given the fact that this agreement was negotiated almost as long as the marriage. The agreement was negotiated for almost a year with very competent attorneys, and therefore there was no fraud, there was no duress. These are both competent parties. Mr. 𝐬𝐝𝐫𝐽𝐝, an accomplished business person who had hired very competent attorneys to do this. There were full disclosure of assets and liabilities, and it was not at all unreasonable. Getting to the material change in circumstances, I heard quite a bit of testimony regarding it, but I don't find there to be a material change in circumstances that's unfair to Mr. Guobadia, as I heard, his net worth of or his the 300 million and 297 million of it.
300 million. So essentially, Simon said that he lost income, or possibly, maybe that's not what he said, but what he did say is by him being basically forced out of the United States, he cannot run his businesses as he would normally do. Listen to what the judge had to say with regards to that.
To Simcoe Petroleum, I just don't find it credible that, especially since he testified to the fact that he was able to run the company out of the country before the ICE incident. I don't find it credible that he was unable to, and I also don't see how, even if it were true, I don't see how $297 million just disappears in the ether over a matter of months.
So the judge had a very interesting point to make, because what he said is, let's say you did lose money. We talking about 290 million, 300 million. That's a lot of damn smackaroo. So I can understand what this judge is saying. So the reason, so on the grounds of Simon's situation changing was grounds for him to be able to challenge this thing. But I have to say this, because I was there. In court, nobody really provided any evidence. And I'm going to be honest with y'all, I had never been to a court like that in my life. Like, nobody had anything that showed proof. Not even Porsha. She had a spreadsheet. Remember, we had the conversation about Porsha said that she paid child support. But during that time, she had nothing that said, hey, this amount was, Zelle to this woman, or just no real receipts. So what the judge is simply saying is, if you did lose the money, I don't believe you, and you have provided nothing to prove otherwise.
With no way to recover any of that. There was testimony. Mr. Guobadia himself testified that he had let go either all or the majority of his employees, and I feel that this was, if there has been, in fact, issues with Simcoe and harm, as was pointed out in the closing and in testimony, there were no other witnesses that came on to testify as to what Mr. Guobadia's current net worth is.
So basically, and essentially what the judge is saying, even if it was true, and I don't know if what he was saying was true or not, the judge is saying, where is the evidence? Now, one of the things we can take into consideration is that Simon had just been let go from ICE. He said his devices were gone. He didn't have access. So that could have played a part into why he did not have whatever this information is that the judge is saying. You didn't bring any evidence. So maybe when he does his appeal, he'll be able to present some new information.
Where the company stands. I had questions in my mind, were there adequate higher level employees that could have taken the reins. $270 million company is quite a large and successful company. And so I didn't find that at all. Regarding, and I sort of referred to it as an extra prong, and I've already referenced Ms. Ferry's creativity here. Both attorneys have tried to make equitable arguments to me, and I'll get to Mr. Kessler's a little bit later regarding the house. But regarding Ms. Ferry, she made a very valiant attempt at an equitable argument. The confidentiality was very, very important to Mr. Guobadia, and of course you can't unring the bell, and what's been done is done. And so, really the entire contract should be blown up over this. I'm not sure I find that. I went back and pondered that in my chambers at a break and considered that some even then, and considered it even and continue to consider it as testimony and argument was given. I'm not even sure that in of itself is a valid reason to blow up the contract. But I would say that in the end, both parties had unclean hands. I know Mr. Guobadia cited his children, how important the privacy and the confidentiality was to him. But there was testimony and evidence or evidence presented that Mr. Guobadia has a large Instagram following. He was happy to make posts regarding the marriage, and of course I saw the testimony with Ms. Williams and the evidence with her podcast episode that broadcast to a very large audience. And so we ended up with an argument really about who has more unclean hands or who drew first blood. But in the end, I would say that both parties have unclean hands when it comes to the confidentiality aspect of the prenuptial.
So let me kind of quickly explain that. Another one of Simon's arguments was Porsha violated the confidentiality of the prenuptial agreement, which again, I did not find out until I actually went to court because we don't have access to their prenuptial agreement. And I also learned it was, I guess, 250 something odd pages. So within the prenuptial agreement, Porsha was not supposed to talk about things related to their marriage, the house, and things of that nature. Now, those were one of the things that Simon cited in his, motion to not enforce his prenuptial agreement. As you guys heard the judge went looking and said, look, not only did we receive testimony, but both of you and Porsha were pretty much doing the same thing. So I didn't think that was a reason to not enforce the
prenuptial agreement. Give me a second here. So, we have some issues regarding the house, and I've alluded to this already, Mr. Kessler, but this was a very carefully constructed agreement, very detailed, and I'm enforcing the prenuptial as it stands, and I know you've made an equity argument that why it should be transferred to Ms. Williams. I heard some testimonies, some conflicting testimonies over the expenses of the house, and I heard.
Now, let's get into the conflicting testimony. And we kind of talked about this. Simon testified, I believe he said the expenses was about $50,000 per month, right? Porsha testified about 20 something, which were a huge difference. I mean, you're talking about 20,000, you're talking about 50,000. Now, for the people in the back who think they know everything, let's say the mortgage was 20,000. Let's just say it was. We know that it wasn't, but it would not be $30,000 of maintenance or $30,000 of water, gas, and electric. That's not it. So simply what the judge is saying, one person testified to 50, she said 20 something. There would be no way that house with all the expenses, I'm talking about gas, water, electric, taxes, insurance, and mortgage will be $20,000. I know that. I mean, you can do the math in your head, but the judge is saying, hey, I heard conflicting testimony in terms of the amounts per month. And again, remember Porsha said she paid it, but did not produce one receipt. In fact, she didn't even know what the amount was, which is very interesting because if you paid something, especially a significant amount, you gonna know how much that is. Now, I use my credit cards to pay stuff. I don't really remember little small amounts, But if I'm swiping my card to pay something, for me, like, $1,000, that's a lot, maybe even 500 too, whatever it is. I remember that. I don't remember little $20, $30, but we're talking about a significant amount. But she seemed to not remember. Did she really pay it?
Some testimony regarding some missed mortgage payments, and in fairness to Mr. Guobadia, I feel like those missed mortgage payments were either 2 to 3 months. I tend to think it was 3 months, but that is the time that Mr. Guobadia was in an ICE detention center. And so I know there's concerns about Mr. Guobadia now not being in the United States and having few assets, and I get the inference as far as being able to attach judgments, but I do believe that a lot of that is speculative over what can happen in the future. I didn't see enough evidence regarding abuses on that front to try to buy into the equitable argument that I'm going to go in and change what I think is a very valid prenuptial agreement, or partially enforce the prenuptial agreement. And so I'm going to let that stand the way exactly how it's written. There is an issue there.
May I ask what that means, Your Honor? I'm sorry to interrupt, but as I understand the prenup, he was supposed to transfer to a trust.
Well, I'm going to get to that, Mr. Kessler, and then what I'm going to do is, once I'm done.
So you guys kind of get the gist of it. If not, let me break it down for you. In order for Porsha to move forward with her purchase, because in all honesty, she would not be doing a refinance. A refinance is for someone that owns the property. So she would be doing a straight out purchase. She would be purchasing the home from Simon because he's the true owner. Now, in the prenup, what it says is essentially she would split the equity. So that could mean two things. She would take out either a home equity loan, or she would borrow more than her loan amount, but she would essentially have to give him, 50% of the equity, which would be a loan that she would have to get. But let me make sure y'all understand something. She cannot get a loan until the property is transferred in a trust. So by Simon rejecting this order, what do y'all think happens to Porsha? She cannot refinance this house because, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say refinance. She cannot purchase this home because the home is owned by someone else. And essentially, in order to get it, she would have to have what permission? She would either have to have permission or a court order, which is something she doesn't have. Now I need you guys to really think about this for a second. Even once the court order was complete, they were giving Simon another 30 days to put the home in a trust. And then if he did not do it, the judge said the court would do it. So essentially what this is this is bad news for Porsha. Porsha, you're not getting the car because obviously, he has not paid it off. It is a lease vehicle, and the house is something that she's waiting and hoping to see what's going to happen. But what is happening in the meantime? What's happening in the meantime? Because one thing we probably know for sure is that Simon is not making those payments. So essentially, this means that Porsha needs to figure out a way to come up with these payments and keep this house from being lost, because essentially the bank don't give a crap who pays as long as it's been paid. So at this juncture, Porsha's home purchase has been halted as Simon rejects the final order.
You don't miss nothing, got the scoop on lock.